When you start building unshakable boundaries, you change the entire dynamic of your life without even saying a word, because toxic people don't need an invitation to enter your space. They will walk right in if the door is open. Weak boundaries are like unlocked doors. They send the message that anyone can come in and take what they want. And if you've ever felt drained after spending time with someone, if you've ever walked away questioning yourself, if you've ever lost sleep replaying a conversation in your head, chances are you've allowed someone to cross lines that were never meant to be crossed. This is not about building walls to shut people out. It's about building gates that you control. It's about deciding who gets access to your mind, your time, and your energy. Every boundary you set is a form of self-respect, and self-respect is the kryptonite to anyone who thrives on control and manipulation. Toxic people hate boundaries because boundaries mean limits. They can't take more than you're willing to give. They can't twist your emotions to get their way, and they can't use guilt or pressure to push you into situations you don't want to be in. That's why they'll test you. They'll push against the edges to see if you're serious. And the moment you give in, just this once, they'll know they can do it again. That's why boundaries aren't something you set once. They're something you reinforce every single day. They are not for other people to agree with. They are for you to uphold. People will tell you you're being cold, distant, or difficult. That's fine, let them. The right people will understand your boundaries, respect them, and even admire you for them. The wrong people will leave, and that's exactly the point. Boundaries start small. You don't need to make a dramatic announcement or cut everyone off overnight. You start by paying attention to how you feel when you're around certain people. Do you feel drained, anxious, or second guessing yourself? That's a sign you need to draw a line. Maybe it's limiting how much time you spend with them. Maybe it's deciding you won't answer their calls after a certain hour. Maybe it's simply saying no without feeling guilty. The more you practice, the stronger your boundaries become. And the stronger your boundaries become, the less appealing you are to anyone who thrives on overstepping them. Toxic people are like pickpockets. They only target the ones who look distracted or unguarded. The moment they sense strength and self-control, they move on to an easier target. Boundaries also require you to stop apologizing for having them. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They explain their boundaries like they're asking for permission. I'm sorry, I can't make it. Or, I'd love to help, but no. You don't need to justify protecting your peace. The more you explain, the more room you give someone to argue, negotiate, or guilt you into changing your mind. A firm, no, that doesn't work for me, is enough. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to putting others before yourself. But discomfort is the price you pay for freedom. Every time you hold your ground, you train people on how to treat you, and you train yourself to value your own well-being. You also have to remember that boundaries are not just about keeping bad people out. They're also about protecting your relationships with the good people. Without boundaries, resentment builds. You start feeling taken for granted, and that bitterness seeps into every interaction. But when you have clear lines, you can show up fully for the people you care about without feeling depleted. Boundaries create space for respect, trust, and genuine connection. They let you be generous without being used, compassionate without being drained, and available without being exploited. And that's when you realize boundaries aren't about being selfish. They're about making sure you have enough of yourself to give to the right people. The truth is, toxic people avoid those who have unshakable boundaries because there's nothing for them to gain. They can't manipulate someone who won't play their games. They can't drain someone who keeps their emotional doors locked. They can't control someone who knows exactly where the line is and refuses to let it be crossed. So if you want toxic people to disappear from your life, don't chase them out. Make your space so guarded, so intentional, and so strong that they decide on their own that it's not worth it. You won't need to argue, prove yourself, or fight for your peace. Your boundaries will do the work for you. And the day you truly master them, you'll notice something incredible. You'll stop wasting energy on the wrong people, and you'll have so much more to give to the right ones. That's the power of unshakable boundaries. They don't just protect you, they transform your entire life. Emotional detachment is one of the most powerful tools you can develop if you want toxic people to lose interest in you, because nothing frustrates them more than realizing they cannot provoke a reaction. Toxic individuals thrive on emotional chaos. They bait you, push your buttons, and wait for you to explode or break down because your reaction feeds them. The moment you get defensive, angry, or overly apologetic, they know they have you exactly where they want you. But when you remove that emotional fuel, when you respond with calm, measured control, you starve them of the drama they crave. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring or that you become cold. It means you control your emotions instead of letting someone else control them for you. When someone tries to provoke you, you have to train yourself to pause before responding. That pause is your power. It gives you a moment to assess. Do I really need to react to this, or is this just bait? Often, the smartest move is no move at all. Silence, a neutral expression, or a simple, "I hear you," can be far more disarming than a heated argument. Toxic people are like fishermen. They cast lines of insults, guilt, and manipulation to see what will bite. When you don't bite, they reel their line back in and either change tactics or move on entirely. You're teaching them that you're not an easy catch. This is not weakness, this is mastery. It takes far more strength to stay composed under pressure than it does to snap in anger. Detachment also means not internalizing their behavior. One of the biggest traps people fall into is thinking, "What did I do wrong?" Or, "Why are they treating me this way?" The truth is, their behavior is about them, not you. A toxic person's actions reflect their own issues, insecurities, and patterns. If you make the mistake of taking it personally, you give them access to your self-worth. But when you understand that their tactics are a reflection of who they are, not who you are, you create a mental shield. Their words and actions might touch your ears, but they won't reach your heart. That's the core of emotional detachment. You observe without absorbing. It's also about controlling the energy you give. Some people don't deserve your outrage, your explanations, or even your attention. Every time you react emotionally, you hand them your energy for free. Think of your emotional energy like currency. Would you give your hard-earned money to someone who constantly wastes it? No. So why hand over your peace, focus, and confidence to someone who has no respect for it? Emotional detachment allows you to spend your energy only where it counts, on people and situations that align with your values and goals. This doesn't just protect you from toxic people. It frees up your mental space to focus on things that truly matter. Detachment can also be communicated through your body language and tone. You don't need to shout to make a statement. A calm voice, steady eye contact, and controlled movements tell the other person you're not easily shaken. Toxic people read your reactions like a playbook. If you look flustered, they know they're winning. But if you stay steady, they quickly realize they're wasting their time. Sometimes your silence will scream louder than any argument could. And over time, they will stop seeking you out because they know they won't get the satisfaction they're looking for. Practicing emotional detachment requires self-awareness. You have to recognize your triggers and work on them. Maybe you have a need to defend yourself when someone lies about you. Maybe you can't stand being ignored. Maybe guilt is your weak spot. Once you know where you're vulnerable, you can train yourself to respond differently. Instead of reacting out of habit, you choose your response intentionally. You stop giving people the keys to your emotions and keep them in your own pocket. That's when you move from being a puppet pulled by strings to being the one holding the strings yourself. The beauty of emotional detachment is that it doesn't require confrontation or revenge. You don't have to expose them, win the argument, or prove anything. Your calm presence becomes your shield, and it speaks volumes. People will notice that you're not easily rattled, that you don't crumble under pressure, and that you're not interested in their mind games. And eventually, toxic individuals will either have to adapt their approach or remove themselves entirely from your orbit. You won't have to force them out. Your emotional discipline will naturally repel them. When you master emotional detachment, you step into a different kind of strength, one that isn't loud or flashy, but unshakable. You stop living at the mercy of other people's moods, opinions, or manipulations. You become immune to their tactics not because you're numb, but because you've learned that your peace is worth more than winning any petty battle. And when you protect that peace, something amazing happens. You attract better people, healthier situations, and a life that isn't constantly hijacked by someone else's chaos. That's the quiet power that makes toxic people avoid you without you ever having to lift a finger. Strong boundaries are the invisible walls that protect you from manipulation, disrespect, and emotional harm. And when you enforce them consistently, toxic people have no room to operate. They test limits the way a thief tests a lock. They push, prod, and probe, looking for weak spots where they can slip through unnoticed. If you have no clear boundaries, they'll take mile after mile without hesitation. But when you make it clear, verbally, physically, and through your actions, that certain lines will never be crossed, you instantly become harder to exploit. Boundaries are not about being rude or cold. They are about defining the rules of engagement for how others are allowed to treat you. They're not negotiable, and they're not for show. They are there to protect your time, your energy, and your self-respect. A lot of people think boundaries are simply telling someone, don't do that. But real boundaries go far deeper. They are about action, not just words. If someone constantly interrupts you, you don't just ask them to stop, you limit your availability to them. If someone speaks to you with disrespect, you remove yourself from the conversation. Words are easy to ignore, but actions speak volumes. Toxic people often prey on those who talk about boundaries but fail to uphold them. The moment you set a limit and then back down, you've told them that your boundaries are flexible, and they'll push harder next time. That's why enforcing your boundaries with consistency is the most powerful signal you can send. I am not here to be used, controlled, or drained. Boundaries also teach people how to treat you. If you answer calls at midnight, you've taught them you're always available. If you allow someone to repeatedly make jokes at your expense without consequence, you've taught them that your dignity is negotiable. Every time you allow a small violation to slide, you silently give permission for bigger violations. This doesn't mean you have to be aggressive or confrontational, but it does mean you must be intentional. You decide how much access people get to your life, how much of your time they can take, and how they can speak to you. And when someone crosses that line, you respond, not out of anger, but with calm, firm action. That's how you train people to respect your boundaries without ever having to beg for it. One of the hardest parts of enforcing boundaries is the fear of losing people. You worry they'll get upset, that they'll call you selfish, that they'll pull away. And the truth is, sometimes they will. But that's not a loss, that's a filter. Anyone who leaves your life because you refuse to be mistreated was never truly there for you in the first place. Toxic individuals thrive in environments where they can take without giving, control without being challenged, and disrespect without consequence. When your boundaries remove those benefits, they'll either adapt or they'll disappear. Either way, you win, because you're no longer sacrificing your well-being just to keep someone else comfortable. Boundaries are not just about protecting yourself from others. They are also about protecting yourself from your own impulses. Many times, we cross our own boundaries by overextending ourselves, saying yes when we want to say no, or tolerating situations that drain us because we want to avoid conflict. But every time you betray yourself like this, you weaken your inner foundation. Toxic people sense this self-betrayal and exploit it. They know you'll put their comfort above your own needs, and they'll keep pushing until you stop them. That's why the first step in building strong boundaries is honoring your own word to yourself. When you say you won't tolerate something, you follow through. When you decide your time is valuable, you guard it fiercely. This self-discipline makes your boundaries unshakable. Physical boundaries matter too. Your space, your possessions, and even your body deserve respect. A toxic person might invade your space on purpose, not because they need to, but because they want to test how far they can push you. If you let them stand too close, go through your things, or touch you without permission, you're signaling that your boundaries are open for violation. You must be comfortable saying, "Stop, that's not okay," or simply stepping back without feeling guilty. Guilt is the tool toxic people use to break boundaries. Guilt only works if you believe that protecting yourself is wrong. It's not. Protecting yourself is an act of self-respect, and people who truly value you will never make you feel bad for doing it. Time boundaries are equally important. Toxic individuals are experts at wasting your time with drama, distractions, and constant demands. They want to keep you so busy managing their chaos that you have no energy left for your own life. By setting time limits, whether that's ending a phone call, declining an unnecessary meeting, or not responding to texts at all hours. You send a clear message, my time is mine. They may not like it, but they will respect it if you enforce it consistently. And if they don't, you'll see their true intentions quickly, which allows you to make the necessary cuts. Enforcing boundaries will feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to being the yes person, the peacemaker, or the one who avoids conflict. But over time, you'll notice a shift. The wrong people will fade away, the right people will draw closer, and you'll stand taller knowing you're no longer letting others walk over you. Toxic people will stop seeking you out because you've made it too difficult for them to get what they want from you. You've taken away their access, their control, and their ability to drain you. And all of it starts with one decision: to value yourself enough to draw a line and never let anyone cross it without consequence. Emotional detachment is not about being cold, distant, or uncaring. It's about refusing to let someone else's chaos control your inner state. Toxic people feed off emotional reactions. They thrive when they can make you angry, frustrated, or defensive because it gives them power. When you react, you give them a lever they can pull to influence your mood, your decisions, and your peace. But when you master emotional detachment, you remove that lever completely. They can shout, insult, or provoke, and you remain steady. Not because you're numb, but because you've decided that no one gets to dictate your emotions without your permission. This is one of the most powerful shields you can have, because a toxic person cannot manipulate what they cannot move. Detachment begins with awareness. Most people don't realize how much of their emotional energy is spent responding to other people's moods and behaviors. If someone gives you the silent treatment, you might feel anxious and start overthinking. If they make a sarcastic comment, you might immediately feel defensive. These are automatic reactions that toxic people exploit. Emotional detachment allows you to slow that process down and recognize, this is their behavior, not my truth. You stop absorbing their negativity like a sponge and instead observe it like a passing storm. You can acknowledge what's happening without letting it flood your mind or change your state. One of the key parts of emotional detachment is separating the person from the problem. When you attach your self-worth to someone else's approval or opinion, you become a puppet on their strings. If they praise you, you feel high. If they criticize you, you crash. That's exactly how toxic people keep you unbalanced, by giving and taking approval at will. When you detach emotionally, you stop playing that game. Their opinion becomes just one piece of noise in the background, not the soundtrack of your life. This doesn't mean you ignore constructive feedback, but it does mean you filter it through your own values instead of blindly accepting or rejecting it based on who it's coming from. Detachment also means refusing to engage in the emotional traps toxic people set. They might bait you into an argument, hoping to twist your words and make you look unreasonable. They might create drama to get your sympathy, only to later blame you for their problems. If you take the bait, you enter their arena where they have the home advantage. But when you detach, you stay in your own arena. You respond with calm, short answers. You don't defend yourself endlessly against baseless accusations. You don't try to fix their problems or rescue them from self-inflicted chaos. You simply refuse to participate in the emotional roller coaster they're offering you a seat on. One of the most effective tools for emotional detachment is the pause. When a toxic person pushes your buttons, instead of reacting instantly, you give yourself space. That space might be a deep breath, a moment of silence, or even walking away. In that pause, you regain control. You remind yourself that you are not obligated to respond on their timeline or in the way they expect. This pause disrupts their control because they can't feed off your immediate reaction. Over time, this frustrates them because their tactics no longer work on you, and eventually, they move on to easier targets. Detachment is also about boundaries in your own mind. You decide what thoughts you will entertain and which ones you will reject. A toxic person might plant seeds of doubt, hoping you'll water them with your attention. But with detachment, you simply refuse to nurture those seeds. You replace them with truths that align with your values and self-respect. This mental discipline ensures that their words don't linger in your head long after the conversation ends. Your inner space becomes sacred ground, off limits to the poison they try to plant there. A common misconception is that detachment makes you less compassionate. In reality, it makes you more effective in your compassion because you can see situations clearly without being clouded by emotional manipulation. You can choose when to help, when to step back, and when to walk away entirely without guilt. You stop enabling toxic patterns under the disguise of kindness. True compassion sometimes means letting someone face the consequences of their own actions without rescuing them. Detachment gives you the strength to do that, even when it's uncomfortable. Practicing emotional detachment takes time, especially if you've spent years being emotionally reactive. At first, it might feel unnatural, like you're holding back something that wants to burst out. You might even feel guilt for not reacting in the ways you used to. But over time, you'll realize that you've gained something far greater: freedom. You're no longer at the mercy of someone else's moods or mind games. You wake up with peace, and you keep it no matter what they try. That peace becomes your silent power, the thing that keeps toxic people away because they can't penetrate it. In the end, emotional detachment is about reclaiming ownership of your inner world. It's about saying, "My emotions belong to me, and no one else gets to control them." It's about protecting your mental energy so you can invest it in people and situations that truly matter. And the more you practice it, the more you'll notice that toxic people simply stop coming around. Not because you've hidden from them, but because you've become unshakable. And to someone who feeds on chaos, there's nothing less appealing than a person they can't control. Silence is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is not avoidance. Silence is a deliberate choice, a controlled weapon, and one of the most disarming responses you can give to a toxic person. They expect noise, arguments, explanations, defensiveness, endless back and forth. They want you to respond so they can twist your words, poke at your emotions, and pull you deeper into their game. When you give them silence instead, you remove their stage. You leave them performing to an empty room, and for someone who thrives on reaction, that emptiness is unbearable. Silence is the refusal to give them what they want most: your attention, your energy, and your emotional involvement. There's a discipline in choosing silence when you could easily speak. Most people rush to defend themselves when attacked, to explain when misunderstood, to correct when someone lies about them. But toxic people don't want the truth. They want the fight. They want the emotional charge that comes from watching you struggle to prove yourself. Silence cuts that off at the root. It tells them without words that you are not seeking their approval, and you do not value their opinion enough to argue. That alone can make them lose interest because their tactics no longer work on you. In their eyes, silence is frustrating because it's unshakable. In your eyes, it's freedom. Silence also buys you time. In the heat of the moment, when your emotions are high, words can become weapons, either in their hands or in yours. You might say something in frustration that they will later twist and use against you. By staying silent, you create a pause between their provocation and your response. That pause gives you space to decide whether the conversation is even worth continuing. Often, you'll find that it's not. Silence becomes your filter, allowing you to choose your battles instead of fighting everyone they throw your way. And the truth is, most battles with toxic people are not worth the energy it takes to fight them. Some will try to provoke you harder when you go silent. They may raise their voice, throw accusations, or act in exaggerated ways to force a reaction. That's when silence is most powerful, because it's the moment they realize their control over you is slipping. Your lack of response shows them that you are not trapped in their emotional web. You're not playing their game, and you're not bending to their need for chaos. You're standing in your own calm, and that's something they can't manipulate. Silence is your way of saying, "You don't get to pull me into this." Without ever opening your mouth, silence is also a form of self-protection. Toxic people have a way of taking your words and reshaping them to fit their narrative. The less you say, the less they have to work with. It's like refusing to hand them ammunition. Instead of arming them with phrases they can use against you later, you give them nothing, and nothing is impossible to twist. They may accuse you of being cold, rude, or distant, but those accusations have far less impact when they can't point to something specific you said. In silence, you keep control over your own story instead of letting them rewrite it for you. There's also a psychological edge to silence. It makes people uncomfortable, especially those who rely on control. When you don't react, you force them to sit with their own behavior. Sometimes they'll try to fill that silence by revealing more than they intended, exposing the cracks in their own manipulation. Other times, they'll walk away simply because they can't stand the lack of control. Either way, silence shifts the power dynamic in your favor. It's no longer about what they can make you do. It's about what you refuse to give them. Practicing silence doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means channeling them differently. You still acknowledge your emotions, but you choose not to feed them to someone who will weaponize them. You can process those feelings privately, with people you trust, or through outlets that build you instead of drain you. Silence is not about bottling up your truth. It's about guarding it from those who would distort it. You speak when it serves you, not when someone else demands it. Silence also works in the long game. Toxic people are opportunists. They focus their energy where they get the most payoff. If you consistently respond with silence instead of emotional reactions, you become a low return investment for them. They will often shift their focus to someone else who will give them the drama they crave. This isn't about avoiding confrontation. It's about making it clear that you are not a source of emotional entertainment. Your silence is a boundary they can't cross, and over time, that boundary becomes an invisible wall they stop trying to push against. Ultimately, silence is one of the most underestimated forms of strength. It's the choice to protect your energy, control your narrative, and maintain your peace. It tells toxic people that their words and actions have no power over you unless you grant it to them. And the moment you master that, they lose interest, because they can't control what they can't provoke. Silence doesn't just keep you safe. It makes you untouchable to those who feed on chaos. Boundaries are not about building walls to shut people out. They're about building gates to protect what matters most. And with toxic people, those gates need to be strong, clear, and guarded without apology. Boundaries are the lines that tell others how you will and will not be treated. Without them, you become an open door for anyone's negativity, manipulation, and disrespect to walk right in. With them, you create a space where your peace and energy are no longer up for negotiation. Toxic people test limits. They push, they prod, they see how far they can go before you push back. If you have no clear boundaries, they'll take advantage until there's nothing left of your patience, your self-worth, or your time. Setting boundaries is not about being rude. It's about being self-respecting. When you tell someone, "I'm not available for that conversation," or "I will not be spoken to that way," you're not attacking them, you're protecting yourself. And toxic people hate that. They feed on blurred lines and unspoken rules because it gives them room to twist situations to their benefit. Clear boundaries remove that power. They take away the ambiguity that manipulators thrive on and replace it with certainty they can't ignore. The moment you state your limits and follow through on them, you send a loud message. I value myself enough to protect my space. And for toxic people, that's a message they can't stand. The hardest part of boundaries is not setting them. It's enforcing them. Toxic people will test you to see if you mean what you say. They might ignore your requests, guilt trip you, or accuse you of being selfish. This is where many people cave, thinking that holding a boundary makes them the bad person. But here's the truth: the moment you back down from your own boundary, you've taught them that your limits are flexible, and once they know that, they'll push harder next time. Enforcing boundaries requires consistency. If you say you won't answer calls after a certain hour, don't answer. If you say you won't engage in arguments over text, stop replying. Your actions must match your words, because toxic people don't respect talk, they respect results. Boundaries are also about protecting your mental and emotional energy. You only have so much to give, and toxic people are experts at draining it. Every time you allow them to cross a line, you're handing over a little piece of that energy. It might seem small at first, but over time it adds up until you feel exhausted, resentful, and trapped. A strong boundary says, "This is where I stop giving." And that keeps your energy for the things and people who deserve it. When you stop giving toxic people endless access to your time and attention, you force them to either respect your space or remove themselves from it. Some people will accuse you of changing when you set boundaries, and that's true. You are changing. You're no longer allowing yourself to be an easy target for manipulation or disrespect. You're taking control of your environment and your emotional well-being. And while toxic people may call that selfish, healthy people will recognize it as strength. You're not cutting people off for no reason. You're creating conditions where relationships can be healthy and respectful. If someone can't handle that, it's not because your boundary is wrong, it's because their behavior can't survive within it. Boundaries are also a mirror. When you put them in place, You quickly see who respects you and who doesn't. People who care about you will honor your limits, even if they don't fully understand them. People who only care about themselves will see your boundaries as an obstacle to remove. This clarity is powerful. It helps you identify who deserves to be in your life and who only causes harm. Instead of wasting years trying to figure out someone's intentions, your boundaries reveal them almost instantly. One of the most empowering things about boundaries is that they don't require anyone else's approval to exist. You don't need a toxic person to agree with your limits for them to be valid. You don't need them to like it or understand it. Your boundaries are yours. They exist because you decided your peace, your time, and your mental health are worth protecting. And once you make that decision, their opinion about it becomes irrelevant. That's where your power lies. In knowing that your boundaries are not up for debate. Maintaining strong boundaries with toxic people also changes the power dynamic. They can no longer dictate when and how they interact with you because you've set the terms. They can no longer use surprise visits, endless calls, or emotional ambushes to pull you into their drama because you've closed those doors. You choose the conversations you have, the time you give, and the energy you invest. And when they realize they can't control those things anymore, many will naturally distance themselves. Boundaries don't just protect you. They often push toxic people out of your life without you having to force them. Ultimately, boundaries are an act of self-love. They are the proof that you've stopped prioritizing other people's comfort over your own well-being. They make it clear that you will not sacrifice your peace to keep someone else happy. And once you master them, toxic people begin to avoid you. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your life is no longer a place where their behavior can thrive. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools you have when dealing with toxic people. They want a reaction, anger, defensiveness, explanations, because every reaction gives them a foothold. It feeds their sense of control. But when you meet their provocations with silence, you strip away their power. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It says, you no longer have access to my emotions. When you stop giving them the satisfaction of seeing you upset, they start to lose interest, because the drama they thrive on disappears. Silence creates a void they can't fill, and that void forces them to confront their own behavior instead of distracting themselves with yours. There's a certain strength in holding back words you could easily unleash. Toxic people love baiting you into arguments, because it gives them the chance to twist your words, play the victim, or escalate the situation. But silence removes their ammunition. You give them nothing to twist, nothing to spin, nothing to use against you later. The less you say, the less they can manipulate. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is the one you don't make at all. It leaves them talking to themselves, scrambling to fill the uncomfortable space you've created by refusing to engage. Silence also puts you back in control of your own emotions. When you speak in the heat of the moment, you risk saying things you don't mean or revealing things you wish you'd kept private. Toxic people are skilled at pushing buttons until you react impulsively. But if you learn to pause, if you give yourself the space to breathe before you respond, you rob them of that power. Your silence becomes your shield, protecting you from their attempts to drag you into emotional chaos. It's not about ignoring reality. It's about refusing to let them dictate the terms of the interaction. Another thing silence does is expose their behavior to others. When you remain calm and composed while they spiral into insults, accusations, or emotional outbursts, you make it clear who the problem is. People watching the interaction can see the contrast. They see one person in control of themselves and the other unraveling. You don't need to defend yourself endlessly when your composure speaks louder than any argument you could make. Silence lets their actions become the evidence. And in the court of public opinion, that's often more powerful than any words. Toxic people hate silence because it forces them to sit with discomfort. When you refuse to play their game, they're left without the chaos that fuels them. They may try harder at first, raising their voice, repeating themselves, or throwing in new provocations to get you to break. This is when your silence matters most, because the moment you cave, you show them that persistence works. But if you stay steady, they eventually realize that the old tactics no longer have the same effect. This is when the shift happens, when they either pull back or remove themselves entirely. It's important to understand that silence is not about being passive. It's an active choice. It's you deciding that not every comment deserves a reply, not every insult deserves your energy, and not every argument is worth winning. It's choosing peace over proving a point. And the irony is, when you stop trying to prove yourself to toxic people, you often win without trying. They can't fight a battle you refuse to show up for. Your refusal to engage communicates that you value your peace more than their opinion, and that realization eats away at their influence over you. In practice, silence can take different forms. Sometimes it means literally saying nothing in the moment. Other times it means walking away from the conversation entirely. It can mean delaying your response for hours or days, giving yourself time to think before you speak. It can even mean cutting off contact for a period of time if someone refuses to respect your boundaries. Each version of silence sends the same message. You do not control how or when I respond. This unpredictability frustrates toxic people because they can't manipulate a rhythm they can't predict. Silence also gives you clarity. When you stop reacting instantly, you give yourself space to observe patterns. You start to see the ways toxic people repeat the same tactics, the same guilt trips, the same provocations. And once you see the pattern, it becomes easier to break it. You stop getting caught up in the moment, because you can see the game being played from a distance. Silence turns you from a participant in their chaos into an observer of it, and that perspective makes you stronger over time. Your silence becomes part of your reputation. People learn that you don't get drawn into petty arguments, that you don't give energy to manipulation, and that your peace is not easily disturbed. Toxic people, sensing that they can't get what they want from you, begin to avoid you altogether. They look for easier targets. People who will take the bait, engage in the drama, and fuel their need for control. But you're no longer that person. You've learned that silence isn't about losing your voice. It's about protecting it for the moments that truly matter. There's a power in living in such a way that you no longer seek validation from toxic people. And this power acts like a natural repellent. People who thrive on control, drama, and manipulation are constantly scanning for individuals who can be swayed by praise, guilt, or criticism. When they see that their words have no influence over your choices, they quickly lose interest. You stop being a source of fuel for their ego. This isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that no outside opinion has the ability to sway your sense of self. When you hold that kind of certainty, it creates an invisible wall toxic people can't penetrate. The truth is, toxic individuals survive on leverage. They use your need for approval as a hook, dangling it in front of you to make you dance to their tune. But when you remove that hook, when you no longer crave their acknowledgement or fear their disapproval, they have nothing to control you with. It's like trying to fish without bait. They can cast their line all day, but nothing bites. And the more you show that you're not chasing their validation, the more they're forced to look elsewhere for someone who will. You essentially make yourself an unprofitable investment for them, and they move on to easier prey. When you master this, you no longer over-explain yourself or justify your every move. Toxic people often demand explanations because it gives them a way to poke holes in your reasoning, make you doubt yourself, or guilt you into changing your decision. But when you operate from a place of self-trust, you don't feel the need to convince anyone of your choices. You simply act. This quiet confidence is unsettling to someone who's used to pulling strings. They can't manipulate someone who doesn't need their approval to proceed. You stop being predictable, and unpredictability is something toxic people can't handle well because it strips them of their sense of control. It's also about understanding the difference between constructive feedback and manipulative criticism. One comes from a place of care and respect, the other from a place of dominance and insecurity. When you no longer seek validation, you develop a sharper instinct for spotting which is which. You stop internalizing every negative comment and start filtering what actually serves you from what's meant to control you. Toxic people hate this because their favorite weapon, undermining your confidence, stops working. They can throw their worst at you, but it no longer sticks because you've decided that their opinion isn't the currency you live by. Another layer of this is emotional independence. When you're not chasing validation, you're not riding the highs and lows of someone else's approval. Toxic people love to create this emotional roller coaster. Praise you one day, criticize you the next, because it keeps you off balance. But when you're grounded in your own sense of worth, their mood swings don't dictate yours. You remain steady. This steadiness is incredibly unattractive to those who rely on chaos to feel powerful. They realize they can't shake you, can't make you dance to their rhythm, and eventually, they find you too boring to bother with, which in this context is exactly what you want. Not seeking validation also changes how you communicate. You stop sugarcoating the truth just to avoid conflict. You stop agreeing with things you don't believe in just to be liked. You start speaking from a place of authenticity rather than appeasement. And when toxic people hear this, it throws them off balance. They expect compliance, not conviction. They expect you to bend, not stand firm. And when they realize that their approval means nothing to you, it dismantles the entire game they're trying to play. They can't reward you into obedience or punish you into submission, so they eventually disengage over time. This mindset becomes your default. You start entering every interaction from a place of internal stability, not external dependence. You notice that toxic people either keep their distance or tone down their behavior when they're around you because they know their usual tactics won't land. They're used to dealing with people who need to be liked, who need reassurance, who are afraid of being disliked. But you're not operating on that wavelength anymore. You've decided that being true to yourself matters more than pleasing people who don't have your best interests at heart. This isn't about being closed off or unkind. It's about having a filter for whose opinions you allow to influence your life. You still value the perspectives of people who are honest, respectful, and constructive. But you've stopped giving weight to the noise from those who are manipulative, insecure, or malicious. And because toxic people can sense when their voice no longer holds power in your life, they instinctively avoid you. They know they can't win the same way they can with others, so they save their energy for someone who will give them what they want. What they don't realize is that by avoiding you, they're giving you exactly what you want: peace and freedom from their chaos,